Comic books are changing the way that I view reading.
Kenny's Books.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Kenny. This is Win, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about how I've just started reading comic books and how they're changing the way that I see reading and the way that I consume stories, consume media, and honestly, just to talk about some really good comic books that I've read recently and am following their ongoing series. So, pretty much my entire life, I've been a fan of comic book movies. I watched the first Spider-Man 2002 when I was like 7 years old, and pretty much that started my obsession with comic book movies. I followed the whole MCU. I still go and see pretty much every comic book movie that comes out. Whether or not they're good, that's the question. But I've never really been into reading comic books. I've tried to read them here and there throughout my life, but I just never really got into it. I read Watchmen, the graphic novel compendium of Watchmen, and that was definitely something that was really cool to read, but the movie was a almost one-to-one adaptation of the graphic novel, and so honestly, I was a little bored reading it because I already knew what was going to happen, and it was translated so well to the big screen. However, with the new Superman movie that came out, directed by James Gunn, this changed something in my brain. Like I said, I've loved comic book movies for a really long time, but Superman was one of the best comic book movies I have ever seen, and it really felt to me like it was doing something different that other comic book movies hadn't. I loved the characters, I loved the depiction of Superman, but I loved that when we jumped in, there were all of these other characters that were just in the universe and around Superman. Other superheroes, obviously the cast of the Daily Planet, but I was reading about how people said it felt like picking up a comic book and just jumping right into it. And very rarely do you get to start a comic book from issue 1. So you jump in and you're a little bit of a fish out of water trying to figure out who the characters are, what's exactly going on. But I loved it and I really, really wanted more. So the reason why I'm falling in love with comic books comes down to a couple of things. First of all, when we consume books, it's usually in one giant push, right? You pick up a novel and you read it from cover to cover. Maybe you put it down. Maybe it's a book in a series, but the book is telling you a single story. And as you go through it, it might sit in your brain for the time that you're not reading it, but it's not something that you have to wait to go back to. Obviously, there are ongoing series that we are waiting very patiently to be able to know what happens next. But there's something about a comic book where you buy an issue of a comic book, you read it, and then you've got to wait, sometimes a month for the next issue to be released. And so this has been changing my way that I think about these stories in that they're sitting in my mind a lot longer than I think normal books do because I have to wait to know what happens next. And because these books are fairly short, it makes me go through them a little bit more slowly than maybe I would with a normal book that I'm reading. And I just really love that I have something to look forward to every single month. First of all, because the stories are so good. And second of all, just because of the way, like I said, that it lets me think about it a lot longer than I normally would. Even in today's day and age with streaming services, we're not really getting a whole lot of shows being released week to week. And I think that being able to go and binge watch, 10 seasons of your favorite show cheapens sort of that time that we spend thinking about these stories. And I love thinking about stories, but I love stories that hook themselves into my mind and don't let me forget them. And that's one of the things about comic books that I'm really, really falling in love with. The second thing is, as with many of you guys, I'm sure, I have a tendency to buy books that I don't have the time to read. I pick up books all the time, and it's really a bad habit to just be, spending money on what is essentially decoration for my bookshelf. So there's something about comic books that also really scratches the itch in my brain of being able to pick up something new. And because they're so short, I can sit down and read them, the issue, in one sitting. So as a collector of books, this is like the perfect middle ground of being able to collect something and watching them pile up, but also getting that sense of accomplishment of being able to read them and not just have them sit there collecting dust and having me sit there thinking, oh my god, I can't wait to read this. I really should read this. And then third of all, of course, is it's a comic book, so the art is almost foremost compared to what the story actually is. After watching Superman, I really, really wanted more of that aesthetic. I love the colorful superheroes. I love things being crazy. Superman fights a kaiju. Lex Luthor has a pocket dimension. And the way that those things appear in movies is sometimes dulled down. Like, just look, it took us 20 years to get Wolverine in the yellow suit. But if you go to any comic book shop, you can go and pick up an X-Men comic book and see Wolverine kind of the way he is supposed to be depicted, with all of the craziness that you can hope to read and see. And in 2025, I'm constantly looking for books that are, flipping the script, making me think of something different, using different concepts, and really just being all out, no holds bar. And I think that that's also what's great about the comic book medium, is that these people can just have any idea that they want and they can put it down on the page. If you can draw it, it exists. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of comic books that I've been reading and why I'm loving them so much. Very recently, DC started a new line called their Absolute Universe. And I thought that this was a really good jumping on point for me, because all of these titles are pretty early on in their runs. And the actual shtick of the new Absolute Universe is taking all of these iconic characters and removing key aspects of their backstories. Now, the characters themselves are supposed to be the same people that exist in the normal DC universe, but in a universe without hope. So the Absolute line is looking to examine how these people react in different situations and to see whether or not the way they act is a result of the lives they've led, their upbringing, or if it's more of an innate measure of the kind of people that they are. Absolute Batman is fantastic. This guy is a freaking tank of a dude, and it's really interesting to see his sort of moral dilemma with being Batman and the struggles of being Batman when you're not a billionaire, and how that can, have put its toll on you as a person. The artwork in these books is just incredible. I mean, if you can see Tank of a Batman right there, it's just fantastic to read, and they're super interesting. Again, with the art, each one of these comic books has such a different style to it. You've got something here that I'm reading, the new JSA run, Justice Society of America. And the art on these two separate titles is so completely different that it just sticks out and is really great for me to flip through all the time. And then lastly, my favorite one that I'm reading right now is Absolute Martian Manhunter. So Absolute Martian Manhunter is probably the biggest divergence from what the original character was. The original Martian Manhunter is a Martian named John Johns, I believe, and he shapeshifts into a detective, John Jones. And he's got a lot of the similar powers of Superman, but he's a shapeshifter. He can, read minds and stuff like that. But with Absolute Martian Manhunter, the twist is that John Jones is a regular police detective who is now being possessed by an otherworldly entity known as the Martian. And with that, he's starting to gain these new powers where he can see sort of telepathic energy around the city. I think he might be in Gotham. I don't remember which city he's in. But there is just some absolutely bizarre, incredible color work being done here with these pages, if you can kind of see that. And so it's honestly just like the biggest mix of this creative energy, artwork, and storytelling, because not only are these comic books beautifully illustrated, the ones I'm reading right now are really, really, really well told. And then you can go and flip to something completely different, which is this one called Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, Rite of Spring. which is basically Dexter if the world was full of anthropomorphic animals, humanized animals. And I won't flip through this one because it's a little gory, but some of the artwork in here is just incredible, and I'm amazed that the author of this book can get me to care so much about a woman duck who is looking for her murdered brother. So anyway, those are the ones that I'm reading right now. But now flipping back to sort of more traditional storytelling, and now DC is publishing a new printing of their old comic books called their DC Compact Editions. And they're selling these babies for $10 a pop. One of the problems with trying to read older comic book stories, in my opinion, is that these books can be really, really, really expensive. So one of the ones that I picked up a long time ago was this X-Men Epic Collection, which is something like 200 issues maybe. But this book, brand new, says that it was $50. I got this on eBay for like $20, but it's expensive. I mean, these are full color page illustrations. Particularly these editions have a nice shiny gloss to them where, you know, when you're just buying a normal edition of a comic book, the pages are a little bit more papery. But what's really been getting me into comics is this ability to read these whole DC Comics storylines in one compact book, and they're only $10. So yes, the art is a little bit smaller, but for me, that's totally fine. So if you're looking to get into comic books, I highly recommend you take a look at these because they're just incredible. So going back to Superman, after watching that movie, I really, really, really wanted more. And so I went and I looked at what are the comic books that inspired this adaptation of Superman. What was James Gunn reading that made him tell the story in this way? And the number one comic book that I found that inspired it was All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and with art by Frank Quitely. This is definitely the best comic that I've ever read. I've never cried during reading a comic book before, and these are still early days, so we'll see what happens. But if you loved Superman, you are absolutely going to love All-Star Superman. It tells the story of his final days on Earth, and essentially what happens is he gets tricked into going too close to the sun, and the solar energy overwhelms his cells, and so he's going to die. And it basically tells the story of all the things he thinks he needs to do before he dies to make sure that the Earth is set up to be okay once he is gone. And it covers all kinds of different issues. Grant Morrison, I'm learning, is one of the best comic book writers out there, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of his stuff. I hope they put that into more of his books into these DC Compact editions, because in my opinion, the definitive rendition. He is no nonsense. He's just doing good because he can. Not that he needs to. It's explored in here again that, you know, Superman could rule the world. And to steal a line from Spider-Man, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. And it's very rare that you see a story depicting somebody like this and just doing good for the good of it and not expecting anything in return and spending his last moments trying to set up the world to be okay when he's gone. So in a time right now where things are a little dark and scary, I think we really need stories like All-Star Superman to remind us that you can be good and that people can be good. And again, obviously this is a story, but there are people that you're going to meet in your lives that are just doing good because they can. And I think anybody looking for something that's uplifting should read All-Star Superman. Grant Morrison also goes completely nuts with his concepts, and I just absolutely love that he is, again, no holds bar when it comes to the weird ideas that he comes to. I'm going to spoil a very small segment of All-Star Superman just because I think it's awesome. It's not going to spoil your enjoyment of the book, but one of the issues, Bizarro World is coming to crash into the normal Earth. And so Superman has to essentially fly to push Bizarro back into its Bizarro universe. And when he lands there, he gets stranded and he comes across the Bizarro version of a Bizarro whose name is Zabaro. And so basically the Bizarro is another version of Superman who is the only normal human in a chaotic world. and he's sort of tortured because he's the only one who can understand poetry and beauty and Superman. It's just incredible. It's just really good. It's really strange, and I highly recommend that you read it. So anyway, there's my rambly video about comic books. I love them. I'm going to be talking about them in my weekly wrap-up videos, just because it's new reading. And if you are somebody who likes to read, but you haven't got as much time as you used to, and you really wish that you could connect with a story a little bit more easily than maybe you did in the past, I highly recommend you go and pick up a comic book, because you can get that little jolt of a story, and it might change the way that you think about reading. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. All right, bye.